Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to my latest YouTube video. Today I'm going to be looking at some late round steals for you guys that you can grab, and when you get into the double-digit rounds of your drafts over the next few weeks, these are guys that you can keep an eye on. I got 5 quarterbacks, 5 running backs, 5 wide receivers, and 5 tight ends that I think you should try to grab for your bench when you start to fill out the bottom end of your roster. Kind of give you guys some context of this. This is the consensus PPR ADP that I pulled this from Fantasy Pros. So the reason why I do that, if anybody's not familiar with Fantasy Pros, if you get their consensus ADP rankings, it's from a multiple sites, so it kind of gets a good baseline. Because if you're like me, like I play in some leagues on Yahoo, I play in some leagues on Sleeper, I play in some leagues on ESPN, you know, we're all over the place when you got multiple leagues. So I try to do the consensus rankings so this can appeal to everybody. And then to kind of consider a late round pick or a potential sleeper, what I did is I based it off 12-team leagues. So the 10th round in a 12-team league usually starts around pick 108. So in order for any of these players I'm about to speak about, they had to have an ADP of at least 108 over 108 on going according to their rankings. So why don't I just go ahead and get into this, go ahead and dive into the quarterbacks. These are some young cats. Most of these are some young cats that I'm definitely trying to keep my eye on. As far as if I'm trying to pick a quarterback when I get into the later rounds of the draft, how I view quarterbacks is it's pretty simple. I mean, you're either going to get like a Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson type of talent, and then if you miss out on those guys, honestly, I'm trying to wait. Maybe I grab a Derek Carr, maybe I grab a Kirk Cousins, and then when I get to these later rounds, I try to swoop in and try to hopefully pick the right young guy that's about to break out as the season progresses. So some of those guys that I think could be Tua Tagovailoa. I think sometimes people could give that kid too much of a hard time, but he's got Jalen Waddle, he's got Tyreek Hill, he's got Mike Gesicki in the passing offense, so he's got a good set of skill pass catchers. Chase Edmonds is a good receiving back out of the backfield, and I think with Mike McDaniel, that's why I'm kind of really high on Tua, is more of the new head coach, because I think he's going to set the offense around Tua's skill sets, and not only Tua's skill sets, but he's going to match Tua's skill sets with the skill sets of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and I think that can potentially be an explosive offense if everything clicks right there in Miami. And then my second one is Justin Fields. Now, before I go any further, I do want to reiterate, these aren't necessary rankings of mine. As you guys can see on this graphic, I have my personal rankings. This is going in order of the ADP as far as that number that you're seeing next to the name. That's my apologies. I should have explained that before I got into Tua. But Justin Fields is next according to the ADP, that guy that I'm keeping my eye on. A report came out today that the coaching staff is very happy with the growth that Justin has had over the offseason and in his training camp. Now, obviously, you do get worried about that offense there in Chicago with the offensive line, only having really Darnell Mooney as a legit threat. I like Cole Kmet as well. Spoiler alert, I'm going to mention him later. But I think because of Justin's rushing ability and athleticism, I think he offers a high floor. And I know his offensive line's not the greatest, but that also means he's going to run more, right? So that's another young guy I'm trying to pair with a bridge veteran quarterback until Justin proves himself, where you can insert him in your lineup week in and week out. Another guy I'm high on. I mentioned this in my quarterback ranking video that I released about a week and a half ago. Is Trevor Lawrence. He's actually I have him ranked higher than Tua, Justin, and even Zach Wilson on this list. And the reason why is I think I'm just a huge believer in Trevor Lawrence's talent. He's got a good set of wide receivers there in Jacksonville. He might have a little something in Evan Ingram. We'll see if that guy can either have a bounce back. I'm not trusting that situation, but my point is he's a receiving tight end. And then Travis Etienne is going to be healthy. He's going to be another receiving option. It's going to be a trusty guy from his college days. And based on all the reports, on everything I'm hearing and seeing, Trevor's Trevor's having a great camp. He looks comfortable in the offense, and I think we're going to see a huge year 2 out of Trevor. And that's the guy I'm trying to get on my bench. And then if it's after like the first 2 or 3 weeks and Trevor's lighting it up, then I'm going to put him right in my lineup. And here's a little stat. I am going to drop a little nuggets here. So one thing I do every summer, for those that are unaware, I'm a big fan of collecting stats from the last 3 NFL seasons. I think it gives you great insight on who's been productive in certain categories over the last 3 years, and I think that somewhat translates to guys that you should draft that can help you win throughout the season. And one thing that Trevor popped up, even though he only played in 1 season out of the last 3 years, though, is he averaged 19.6 rushing yards per game. That's the 10th most highest average by a quarterback since 2019. So that's another thing about his game. He is very everybody knew he was athletic coming in, but for some reason people don't talk about how athletic the guy is. So Trevor's a quarterback I'm definitely keeping my eye on in the late rounds. Another guy I'm starting to kind of wonder if I should consider him if I just completely whiff on all the quarterbacks I want. I wonder about Jameis Winston. That offense has down there in New Orleans could be potentially, a high flying through the air type of attack. Alvin Kamara, we don't know where his suspension is. He might be suspended for the first 6 games. So that means they probably may have to lean on. I mean, right now it's Mark Ingram. I love Mark Ingram. He's had a great NFL career, but at this point, he's nothing to scare defenses about. So they're going to have to attack this defenses through the arm of Jameis Winston, their passing attack. And he's got some weapons. He's got Chris Olave. He's got Michael Thomas. He's got Jarvis Landry. Marquez Callaway's a decent backup as a wide receiver 4. He's got Adam Troutman at the tight end position. And I want to say they just signed somebody too, Chris Herndon, who could potentially help out as a tight end. So, and then once they get Alvin Kamara back, that's another receiving back that can help boost the value of Jameis. Even, Jameis has his issues with interceptions. We all know that. But even when Jameis was throwing all those interceptions in Tampa Bay, he was still putting up fantasy numbers. So that is somebody to watch in the later rounds of the draft if you decide that you're going to pass on the guys that are higher up on draft boards and over the next few weeks. And one thing, a little note on as far as those stats since 2019, Jameis Winston, he averages 8.0 pass yards per attempt. That's the 4th highest. So he does push that ball down the field. And then the last one to consider, Zach Wilson. He sounds like I'm going to be honest with you guys, it does sound like he might be struggling in camp at some points. But I still think this offense in New York, if everything can gel together at least after maybe like the first few weeks, he's a guy you got to sit on and be patient with. But he's got Garrett Wilson, Corey Davis, Elijah Moore, Braxton Berrios. He's got the tight end from that was in Cincinnati just signed there. Tyler Conklin, the tight end from Minnesota, signed there. So he's got a double set of tight ends. He's got multiple wide receivers. Breece Hall can be a juice guy out of the backfield with his speed and as far as dump offs. Michael Carter can be a decent guy in the screen game. So I like his skill position. The players that are surrounding him, and if Zach can put it all together, all of a sudden he can be a super late round steal. You see that his ADP, he's going as a 216th player in most boards. So go ahead and moving into the running backs. One guy I'm keeping definitely. These are a lot of these guys. Honestly, they're handcuffs that I believe can pay off for you potentially. One is Ramondre Stevenson. He basically splits reps 50-50 with Damian Harris if we're going to base it on what happened last year. We know that Bill Belichick loves to run the ball, so I think that's going to we're going to see eventually what we saw last year where, one series is Damian Harris, one series is Ramondre Stevenson. And also keep in mind, Damian Harris, for example, last year, he had to miss a game or two, and when he was out, Ramondre Stevenson was easily an RB2 in most fantasy leagues. So him going at 113, he's a guy that where if something happens with Damian Harris, all of a sudden you got a guy that you can slide in your RB2 or flex spot. And one thing to keep in mind too, Damian Harris is in a contract year. So yes, I think Bill rides the hot hand of Damian, he'll run him out of New England. But for any reason, if they wanted to kind of shift gears more towards Stevenson over Harris because they want to make sure Stevenson is comfortable within this offense for the following season, he's a guy that can maybe provide you great value when you get to the back end of the schedule and you get closer to playoffs. Another guy, a guy that's a handcuff right now that you can get really late in drafts is Darrell Henderson Jr. He's the handcuff to Cam Akers. Listen, I love what Cam Akers can bring. I love his talent. He could have a potentially big year. But Sean McVay has been saying over the last couple weeks that Darrell Henderson's going to have a role in this offense. So not only he's going to have a role, he offers upside as a receiver. And then if anything does happen to Cam Akers where he gets hurt again, all of a sudden you got the RB1 in that Los Angeles offense that's going to be able to put up points and be closer to the end zone where you can get that touchdown value. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, look I got myself a solid RB2 or flex in the late rounds of the draft. So that's a guy to keep an eye on. Another guy, Nyheim Hines. He's obviously the backup there to Jonathan Taylor. Now, obviously, Jonathan Taylor is going to dominate the touches in Indianapolis, but Nyheim Hines is going to have a larger role than what he did last year. The Colts have been adamant they're going to be using him more as a wide receiver. They're going to line him up in the slot. They're going to have JT and Nyheim in the backfield at the same time. And they understand they got to use their explosive playmakers because they didn't go out and get some wide receiver. I mean, they drafted Alec Pierce, but it's not like they have a for sure guy opposite of Michael Pittman. So Hines is going to have a significant role in this throughout the season where he can provide you value, especially in those PPR leagues. And, God forbid anything happened to Jonathan Taylor, but if it did, and Hines got to dominate the most of the touches, again, all of a sudden you had a RB2 from a guy that might be able to be a flex option for you, honestly. Even with Jonathan Taylor, I think the way I am understanding Hines' role so far in training camp is he's going to be a guy that I think you could throw in your flex when the matchup is right, too, even with Taylor on the field. One little stat on him since 2019, he's had 147 receptions and 1,112 receiving yards since 2019. Both of those numbers are the 7th highest over the last 3 seasons. So he's a guy that's, if you want to look at just strictly wide receiver production from the running back position, he's a guy that's been in the top 10 at the position over the last 3 years. And then another guy, this guy's been rising up the ranks, Dameon Pierce. He is currently the backup running back in Houston, but there's a lot of buzz surrounding the kid that he's got a lot of juice, and he's going to end up being probably the guy that's going to see a lot of snaps and touches towards the back end of the year. I do think his hype is pushing him up draft boards properly right now. But, I mean, I don't really read into the week 1 preseason depth chart, but I did just see the depth chart right before I hopped on today. They have Marlon Mack listed as the starter. Rex Burkhead is there as well. Now, how I view Dameon Pierce is I think you're going to see a split backfield in Houston. I think you're going to see Marlon Mack, Burkhead, and Dameon Pierce because they got to get the rookie acclimated. I did see a quote from his coach that he has to continue to improve as a pass protector. And for you to be a 3-down back in the NFL, you have to be able to pass protect. And I think as long as he gets better at that throughout the season, he's going to increase his touches more and more. And he's a guy where if you are able to hold on to him and be patient with him on your bench, I could see him taking over the Texans backfield by the halfway point of the year, if not sooner, just depending on the health of Burkhead and Marlon Mack. And he's a guy that could be a good flex option for you, possibly RB2, just depending on how much they are using him and how much Burkhead and Mack are involved in the offense throughout the season. So let's go ahead and move into some wide receivers I'm looking at in the later rounds, past the 10th round, according with a ADP of 108 or greater. I'm looking at Allen Lazard. I mean, he's going as a 115th player as a consensus on the consensus board. That's a guy that's going to be the wide receiver 1 in Green Bay. Now, obviously, we're hearing the hype of Romeo Dubs, so he's probably gonna have a role. I mean, Christian Watson, once he gets off the PUP list, he's gonna have a role. But either way, Alan Lazard is going to be Aaron Rodgers' trustiest weapon when he gets in that shotgun, when he's looking down the field to make a big explosive play for the Packers offense. So I think he's going to dominate in targets in that Green Bay offense, and not only that, he offers that big body presence too. So he's going to be that red zone threat for Rodgers when the Green Bay gets in the red zone. So I think Alan Lazard, with where he's going off on the board, I mean, I could see him, if him and Rodgers can get things clicking this year, and he can at least be somewhat of not Davante Adams, but somewhat of Davante Adams production. I think you're talking about a guy that's going super late that can slide into as a wide receiver too at some point. Then now the next few guys on my list are young cats. I'm willing to take a gamble on. And here's the thing with me with wide receivers. Everybody knows I love year 3 wide receivers. But another thing I like to do when I'm on my bench, when I get to the bench side of it, I like to splash in rookies, as many as I can, rookie wide receivers, because if I can just get 1 or 2 of them that are having that explosive impact year 1, like Jamar Chase, right? Then all of a sudden you're getting a huge steal. And the first one I'm talking about is Chris Olave. He's a route running technician. He's a guy that can really tear it up, I believe, with Jameis Winston. And with Michael Thomas being there and Jarvis Landry, the kid is going to see a lot of one-on-one opportunities. And here's the thing, too, with the reason why I'm kind of really liking the idea of drafting Chris Olave late in drafts is because, A, the health of Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry. Now, listen, it sounds like Michael Thomas is healthy. It sounds like everything's going well for him in camp, and there's been no reports about any type of like setbacks with Thomas or anything with Jarvis Landry. But the reason why I mention those two is because they both have recent injury history over the last couple seasons. So if they were to re-aggravate something or bang something else up, that even increases Chris Olave's value even for you more. So I think Chris Olave is a guy I'm definitely trying to get on my bench as much as I can over these drafts over the next few weeks. Another guy is Kadarius Toney. Kadarius Toney, I think he's going to be a little gadget weapon there in New York. I think they're going to utilize his skill set, and I think the reason why I think I can trust this, I think I do trust that Brian Daboll is going to get the most out of his skill position players. And if there is one wide receiver I'm willing to gamble on in this New York offense, I believe it's going to be Kadarius Toney, just because he can take some touches out of the backfield, he can line up in the slot, and he can work as a wide receiver. And I like that potential. So like I said, if I'm in later rounds of the draft and I'm looking at wide receivers for my bench, I'm drafting young guys with potential. I'm going for the ceiling play for guys on my bench. Another guy, speaking of that, is number 4 on this list, Garrett Wilson. He's Chris Olave's partner from Ohio State, of course. That's with the Jets. And I just was such a huge, big fan of this kid's talent anytime I was turning on the tape back in the spring. And I think he could be a playmaker at this next level. It's going to be very much on Zach Wilson, and if that kid can deliver on his talent as a quarterback. And if he can, and if Garrett can pick up with this scheme pretty quickly and get adjusted, I think you're going to see him. You know, sometimes we see some of these rookie wide receivers where it kind of takes them a month or two to kind of get acclimated to the NFL, and then they just take off for like the back half of the year. I could see that happening with Garrett Wilson there with the New York Jets. Last guy on the list is going to be Michael Gallup. I think with him going as late as he is a guy that you can stash on your bench until he's ready to play. He's definitely a guy you should, I think, grab. He's going as the 143rd, 143.8. I mean, basically the 144th player off most draft boards. And I do apologize if you guys are hearing that. That is Titan's first visit this year, drinking some water, so you guys might be hearing him slurping. So I do apologize about that. But with that being said, Michael Gallup, since 2019, he has averaged 15 yards per reception. This is a minimum of 60 receptions, and that is the 10th most since 2019. He produces anytime he gets the opportunity. And then when you look at that Cowboys passing attack, it's nobody outside of CeeDee Lamb and Dalton Schultz right now. So he can immediately come back in the offense and get at least the second most targets and be an immediate producer for you. Now, as I mentioned, you might have to stash him on your bench for a minute. It does sound like he's for sure going to miss week 1, maybe possibly the first few weeks of the season. But once he's back in there, this is a guy that can easily be a wide receiver 2 on a fantasy roster, and he's going super late right now, and I think he's going to be a steal for those that are willing to take a chance and are willing to be patient until he's back in that Dallas lineup. Going ahead and wrapping up this with the tight ends, guys that you can consider later in the late rounds of the draft. First one, Mike Gesicki. He's likely going to be the third. We'll see. I think he'll have his games where he can be the second, maybe. I don't know if he'll ever be the most targeted receiver in games for Miami, but it's him, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle. And what you really like about Gesicki's potential is those speedster type of guys can really stretch the field, and that's going to really open up things for in the underneath where Tua is very accurate in that intermediate game, where they could take advantage of Mike Gesicki. He's going to be his red zone option whenever they get closer to the end zone. And then when you take a look at his production since 2019, I'm going to kind of run over these because he was in multiple stats. He had 177 receptions, was the 6th most over the last 3 years. His 2,053 yards was the 5th most. Here's the thing. He only averaged 42.8 receiving yards per game. That's the 10th most. So obviously you want to see him get a little bit more, get to be more consistent with his receptions and receiving yards. He averaged about 11.6 yards per receptions, which is the 10th most. But he's a guy that's playing on the franchise tag, so he's got to prove himself once again that he's worthy of a long-term contract. So I could see him having a huge year, especially with how late he's going. He could easily finish as a top 5 tight end at the end of the year. A couple other guys, these are younger tight ends I'm looking at. Pat Freiermuth, he's just a guy there in Pittsburgh that I could see being doing what he did last year. If anybody remembers, as a rookie, he became a reliable, consistent fantasy tight end. He was getting those 4 to 5 receptions a game. Might not be getting crazy yards, but he's finding the end zone quite often. And then with it being Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett being the quarterback throughout the year for Pittsburgh, I just see both those guys targeting their tight end as much as they can. And I think Pat Freiermuth could be a late round steal at the tight end position this year. Another guy, Cole Kmet. He's Justin Fields' tight end. As I mentioned earlier, when I was talking about Justin Fields, it's like basically Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet. Regardless who it is, he's going to have the most or the second most targets throughout games throughout the year, unless they get another guy that proves himself. I think he'd be a trusty weapon for Justin in that when they get closer to the red zone. I think he offers that touchdown upside as a tight end, which is sometimes everybody knows that plays fantasy football. From the tight ends, sometimes all you can hope for is that they're going to get you a touchdown in games. And I not only think that he can be that guy for you, but I could see him putting up more of a higher consistent receiving yards per game average this season. Another guy, I'm going to say Irv Smith Jr. still. Now, he is banged up. He hurt his wrist. He should be ready by the opening game for Minnesota. And he might be a guy because the injury, he might slip out of drafts where maybe you can grab him off the waivers, depending on the size of your league. But the fact is, with the Minnesota passing attack under Kevin O'Connell, it's going to be a more pass-oriented offense. So that offers more opportunity for Irv in Minnesota, and there's really no tight end depth with the Vikings. So he's gonna dominate the most of the snaps out of the position. He's got Justin Fields and Adam Thielen on the outside, so that's gonna open up things for him. And I think if he can finally stay healthy, I think he's gonna be a pretty good consistent fantasy option for you. He's at least going to be a streamable option, I think, as long as he can stay healthy. But he's a guy to keep an eye on if you're looking for a late round tight end, because I know sometimes you're not willing to reach on these tight ends, and you got to take a stab late in the drafts, and I think Irv Smith might be a guy for you to consider. And then go ahead and wrap up the tight end position. I'm going with Noah Fant. I think he can easily be the third highest targeted receiver there in Seattle. You don't necessarily love the quarterback situation with Geno Smith. Now, it does sound like he's going to probably be the opening game starter over Drew Lock. But I mean, with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett up there in Seattle, those guys are going to dominate the eyes as far as from the defenses. So it's one of those things like I was kind of mentioning with Mike Gesicki, where that could open up some opportunities for Noah Fant for them to use his athleticism to pick up good chunk plays. And he's a guy that's been actually productive from the tight end position over the last 3 years. Since 2019, he has 170 receptions and he has a 1,905 receiving yards. Both those ranked as the 8th most by a tight end over the last 3 NFL seasons. So he's been quietly productive at the position. So when you get in those late rounds of the draft, he might be a guy that you can at least start with, right? These tight ends, I always say, like, oh man, they give me such a headache. But yeah, that is my latest YouTube video. As always, if you guys enjoyed today's video, hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can keep up with all my latest content. And then also, go tell a friend. Let's grow this thing. If you guys have any questions about anything, feel free to hit me up on my Twitter. Feel free to get in the comment section. Let me know what late round potential players that you are targeting in the comment section. If anybody has any type of videos they are looking for over this next month as we get through the drafts, I am open to suggestions. So get in the in the comment section. My next video I am planning on doing though is, everybody knows I am a streamable defense guy. I don't pick a defense. I'm streaming defenses all the time. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna list probably 5 or 10 defenses that I think you should leave your draft with, because I think they got a great streamable option for you during week 1 of the NFL season. Other than that, I'm out of here. You guys enjoy your day. Peace out.